Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick. It's time for camp notes from today, July 26, 2025, the fourth day of camp. A very hot but somewhat overcast day, providing us a little bit of relief there, but still quite hot. You feel the sweat running down to your face, into your eyes on a regular basis, and it was not an easy day to be out there. No pads for the players again today. First padded practice will come after a day off on Sunday. On Monday, so everybody's really looking forward to that, and more real football, as John Harbaugh has referred to it, more like real football. 4 players absent from today. Jake Hummel still cut his hand, is still on the NFI, or had it on Football Injury, I should say, not on an NFI list, but he missed practice again, and it's been now all week. I guess he's missed practice. Emory Jones is actually on the NFI list, of course, with that shoulder problem. Ardarius Washington still at PUP, and Keith Kirkwood sat out. We had one more Chidobe Awuzie the last 2 days. Has not really played more than many snaps at all. I'm not sure he was in there at all today. He was probably in for a few yesterday, but he's obviously nursing something. Not sure whether it's a minor kind of a soft tissue thing or exactly what it might be. But he's certainly been slowed down, if not shut down, these last couple of days. Now, the big news from today's practice is an unfortunate one. A cornerback, Bilal Kone, went down during positional drills and did not return. So there were some offense on defense groups going around in several places on the field, and I was watching on field 3. Apparently this thing happened on field 1, and I'm not sure exactly what the situation was. I only had it reported to me. I did not see him leave the field, but he did not return, and I don't have an update. Unfortunately, when you have an injury and then John Harbaugh is not at the podium, this was the first day this week he was not. It was the coordinators today, all 3 of them, special teams and offense and defense, which we'll get into later. Then you can't ask the question about what happened. He might not know anyway. He might not be willing to tell us, but we should have an update Monday on the status of Bilal Kone. Unfortunately, that's a very deep cornerback position, but injuries very quickly can start making the decisions for you in terms of depth. And the Ravens have been, I think, so far had a reasonably healthy camp. Don't know exactly the nature of this situation with Kone. All right. The fourth consecutive day, the Ravens ran set and snap drills on their first 11-on-11 actions. The first time they get out there on 11-11, they basically come to the line of scrimmage. They try and get into their sets very quickly, the goal being that they can, first of all, run as many reps as they can of this, but also that they have that as a portable skill they can take into the season, get to the line of scrimmage quickly, know what they're supposed to do, and be ready then for Lamar Jackson to make changes at the line of scrimmage. Monken says, okay, anyway, they had 6 false starts on the day. That did not include one during this very drill, which is, you're doing a set and snap drill. Basically, all you're doing is running the line of scrimmage, get set, make sure you get off on the snap properly, and you have a false start on one of those plays is exceptionally bad. But then they had 6 more in other 11-on-11 plays during the day, which is completely unacceptable. Another time, the offense had to call a timeout. Now, the point has been made, I think, by John Harbaugh, but prior, that the set and snap drills are an attempt to put themselves in a better position with regard to pre-snap fouls. And my philosophy on pre-snap fouls with regard to offensive line scoring is they are an evil, but they're kind of a price of playing poker evil. You want to reduce it, of course. I'm not making this a foolish thing that they're doing, but they're also trying to do it realistically. And this is one of the things that Todd Monken got into in his time at the podium, was to say that he would again, and I asked him this question during OTAs, he said the same thing. He would not give in to calling everything under a single cadence, even though they're having tons of fouls on this, and it's kind of messing up practice in a way, but with how many false starts they've had, he wasn't going to just start having a single cadence that they would use all the plays go in one, for example, or first noise, or first whatever, He's not going to do that because it's not the way they're going to play football during the regular season, and so he doesn't want to get in those kind of habits. It makes all the sense in the world, by the way. Hopefully, these false starts will come down some as the preseason certainly starts. But after 4 straight days of them running these drills, you wonder how much longer will they do it. Now, there are things to be gained. I mean, you gain other things. Get to the line of scrimmage quickly, know your assignment, get off the ball quickly is something else they're looking for. Because, by the way, you need to have that juxtaposition. It's not enough to just know your assignment, go to the line of scrimmage, because you could just sit there and not get off the ball until everybody else has moved, in which case you've kind of cheated on the assignment, because part of the thing is you have to get off right at the snap. So they want people to be off the ball quickly out of this in order to get the full value out of the drill. And it makes sense to continue it. It certainly makes sense to continue it when you're having a lot of trouble with these, and have a false start penalty as one of these drills is happening is just the ultimate. No one has asked the question yet of whether they will go back to having laps for false starts. And one problem is we had 6 false starts today. I don't think I had even one instance where I was able to identify the player, but the flags were coming out regularly. The officials were throwing them from the side of the play. In a lot of the plays, we seemed to be at a fairly long diagonal from the play that we're down by the right goal line as you face back towards the building from field 3. So that it was a longer view for us in the media, and we couldn't always tell couldn't at all tell who the player who was jumping was. But anyway, it being what it was, it's an ongoing struggle to be continued in terms of these pre-snap infractions. Moving on to the kickers. Now, a big day for the kicking. They actually had a big 4 days for Tyler Loop. He's looked fantastic so far. Made all of his kicks in the 4 days. I think it's 23 out of 23 now. Hoyland tried 3 kicks. Made 3 out of 4 kicks. He made 3 and was wide left 42 on his longest kick, which was his only miss. Yesterday, he had, I think he had 1 miss, or he might have had 2. I forget which, but he hasn't been perfect. And Loop, of course, was either 9 out of 9 or 10 out of 10, depending on who you ask, from yesterday. That included a 63-yard field goal. Today was 7 of 7. It was a long of 40 yards. So no long distance bombing here. And we don't really get terrific clarity on who's going to kick on which day, but hey, that's why we're just there to record what's going on and not try and otherwise slant it or try and get all the information in advance. But both kickers kicking today was a mild, perhaps surprise, after Loop did, I think, all of the kicking yesterday. So anyway, a substantial move forward from Loop, making 17 of 17 kicks, including 1 from 63 in the last 2 days. And he's, I believe, 23 of 23. And I saw Jonas Schaefer had a note on it that Hoyland was 16 of 18 so far. So it's not like he's crapping the bed or anything, but Loop is really making good. The one point was made about this, I thought this was an important one, is I did notice I was actually able to stand under the uprights for some of Loop's kicks during OTAs, and in particular when he's kicking without a holder. And the did not quite have the perfect end-over-end straight ball, end-over-end rotation. It was more like a 12:05 to 6:05 rotation, which will tend to have the ball drift from right to left as the kicker is facing it. And there was definitely some of that was apparent in terms of what was happening with Tyler Loop in OTAs. And I think it led to some inaccuracy. But it looks like he and Hoyland both, I would say, have straightened out their kicks tremendously during the camp period. So it's great to see. And this may be a case where there isn't room for John Hoyland, but some other team really wants him. That he's played very well. I would say Tyler Loop has gone a long way towards solidifying this spot. There were questions that came up during interviews about whether or not when that kicking thing will be decided and whatnot. And Horton did not want to answer that. He wanted to basically talk about it. Both kickers are going to kick in the preseason and things like that. Now, Horton is a special teams coordinator. This may actually not be his call. He may have a say in it, a vote in it, a suggestion able. In the end, it well could be Harbaugh's call. It could even be a DaCosta call if they have an opportunity to, say, trade a player like Hoyland and get something back. Remember, Kari Vedvik went for a 5th-round draft pick. That was pretty freaking cool when it happened, and then Kari Vedvik didn't end up being much of anything in his years that he was in the league. Years that he was in the league. Much known for what happened to him, though, in a kind of a not so great neighborhood in Baltimore one late night, and how it cost him an entire season. So anyway, kicking drills go on. What else we got more on this today? The stars of the day, I'll give you 3. Actually, I'll give you 4. I'm going to give you a bonus star today. The first is Jair Alexander. Now, he wasn't perfect. He did give up one pass on the right sideline to Tez Walker, a beautiful back shoulder throw, which we'll get into. Tez Walker also one of the stars of the day. But he was right there with Bateman, forcing an incomplete with an overthrow, kind of pushing him towards the sideline, 20 yards down the left sideline. Nice play by him. Then he again had tight coverage of Tylan Wallace. Similar play again. Jackson's pass incomplete, out of bounds. A lot of that. Whenever you throw a shadow over the receiver, your interception radius is sitting there, and you have the inside leverage of the play. There's a good chance the quarterback is going to throw that ball out of bounds, and it'll be effectively a forced incomplete. On the throw to Walker, beautiful turn for the ball by Walker, and Jair kind of overran the play. But I thought this is another good game of Alexander being Alexander. He has a big history of getting his hands on the football. He's been very good at that. So if he does this other part of the game well, where he can stay with the receiver effectively down the sideline, that adds that much more value to his game. He's unlike, say, a JED who can often stay with the receiver and not find the football. Alexander has done that quite well in his career. Okay, let's do Tez Walker next, since I already gave him away. He made a nice sliding grab in front of JAD on the left sideline for a 15-yard catch. That came from Cooper Rush. Then he caught a 30-yard pass from Lamar between the hashes, where he tracked the ball back to the middle of the field. So Lamar effectively threw the ball up to an empty part of the field, asking Walker to go get the football. May have been part of the route, may have been further than the route would normally go, or it may have been Lamar just seeing the empty part of the field and asking his receiver to go get it. But however this play came together, Walker tracked the ball very well to the middle of the field and beat Wiggins doing so. So, you're beating the only man on the team who's probably faster than you in Wiggins, who's, a 428, 40 guy. Walker, a 436, 40 guy. And they've got other people, obviously Keaton Mitchell's very fast. But those guys, going one-on-one is a really nice move for Tez to go back and track the football. And I would rate tracking the football as something he did a little bit untested on. Obviously the big complaint we've had is about comeback routes and actually coming back on the sideline for the football. Very good sign for Tez. So I think both those things are good. Then he caught also a 25-yard pass on the left sideline that I mentioned earlier. Beautiful back shoulder throw. Jair Alexander kind of ran past the play. Not much he could have done about it anyway without, drawing a flag. And Walker turned back. The ball was there. And it was a very nice play there. So all 3 of those plays I thought are things that highlight the value of Tez Walker and may put him in a position to exploit his speed. So certainly if you're going to track the ball towards the middle of the field, there's rarely going to be a cornerback who can keep up with him doing that. If he's going to come back for the football effectively, watch out, corners, because you're going to need to leave him a space, as you always have, in terms of him respecting him as a deep threat. So I thought it was a very big day for Tez Walker. And I know there are other reporters who've said they've seen a lot from Tez Walker already. There was some in OTAs that he did some things well, looked like he was coming back. I mean, I thought you see a little bit of germination of that in the OTAs, but nothing like today. Today's best day by far might be Tez Walker's best day as a Raven, and that would include his 20-yard touchdown at the Meadowlands. I thought this probably was the single best day he's had in terms of advancing his own stock. Number 3 is Adisa Isaac. Now he hasn't shown up too much, honestly, in camp, but he did 2 things here. He drew a hold on Joe Noteboom on a run left. Always a good thing. So when a lineman does that, I always, a big positive note in a kind of extended treatment in the defensive articles, but it was a good play by him there. And then 3 plays later, he bottled up Marcus Major on a run left. Nice ability to stretch and find the player, find the running back, and keep him from getting more than about a no gain on the play, I would say. Another one I'll give you from earlier in camp. I don't think a lot of people will have this guy, but Teddy Buchanan. He stretched Hill to the right sideline for no gain on an early play. It was very nice. And then he blitzed to pressure rush, which forced his throw. The throw is dropped by Wade. It's unfortunate for Wade because he's had some problems already this camp dropping the football, where I think that was a strength of his last year. But Buchanan getting a pressure and a nice run play in the same practice is a good one. When the pads come on, I think we'll see some more things about Teddy Buchanan and just where he is. And I'm hoping Harbaugh comes through on his initial thought that he was going to allow some tackling in this practice on Monday. That ought to be really fun and interesting to see how the players look there. We had a number of highlights from either 11 on 11 or 7 on 7. So 11 on 11, unless I otherwise note it. We'll start with Bateman, had a 15-yard grab between the hashes with Wiggins trailing him, another crossing route. I wouldn't say Wiggins had a terrible day, but Wiggins did not quite look like he had the tightness of trail coverage you'd expect given the recovery speed he brings to the field. So I'll just say that. But Bateman, nice grab on that. And Bateman is a slippery top of the stem guy too. So he probably threw a pretty good fake on Wiggins to make that happen, to create some of that separation. Anthony Miller leapt to haul in a catch from Cooper Rush, 10 yards between the hashes. Nnamdi Madubuike had a pressure. Then and it was in the end zone on Jackson. Then he leapt again and knocked down Jackson's pass. It could have been a really disastrous play in an actual game, but he just knocked it backwards out of the end zone. So it would have just been an incomplete pass, but still good play. Derrick Henry, we have seen a lot so far of Derrick Henry getting first contact in level 2. And he had another couple of good, nice open space runs here. Was having a discussion with people on the sideline here about whether there is some brother-in-law play involved. That's one possibility. Or possibility number 2 is nobody really wants to get in front of Derrick Henry and make a faux tackle on him in these kind of run drills when they occur. But he seems to be getting a lot of level 2 first contact. He has some good field vision. I mean, that's definitely a part of it. I don't want to, put this off as if Derrick Henry isn't doing anything special to get level 2 first contact, but it may be a combination of factors, that it's not just his great field vision and his good speed and his one cut ability there may actually be some defenders who are actively avoiding injury risk. They may actively be avoiding being the player to get right in front of Henry. I would certainly say there's potential risk for a player doing that. Derrick Henry really does try and run through contact even in these sorts of practices. All right, moving on. Jackson hit Likely on a trick play, and I won't go and get further into what the trick play was, but it was hit him at the line of scrimmage between the hashes and the right numbers. And then it appeared to go for about 20 yak. So it was kind of a play where some space got cleared out, probably by the delay involved with the trickery, and then Likely went for about 20 yards after the catch, which was nice to see him do. We had a longer beam make a nice quick tackle of Walker on a short pass right. Longer beam is visible from time to time. He's certainly not invisible out there. He's been playing more. I better not say that, but he is definitely in the mix. And I think the injury to Kone can only improve his stock today in terms of his chance. JAD in his play has been probably at a little bit higher than expected. And he had a highlight here today we're going to get into as well that might make it more difficult for him to make the team. So we'll see how that works out. But certainly the injury to Kone is thins out a cornerback room that has a fair amount of surplus depth. Next thing was Cooper Rush, who threw a ball 10 yards between the numbers and the right hash that was first tipped by Sanusi Kane for a pass defense. Went up in the air and was hauled in by Jalen Armour-Davis, who nearly returned it for a touchdown. And it looked like Dayton Wade was the intended receiver. Kane stepped in front of Wade. Ball goes up. Armour-Davis collects it, heads for the end zone. And the offense tried to respond and get him surrounded, but he probably went down about somewhere inside the 5-yard line, I would say. Um, um, did not score on the play, but it looked very good. And honestly, the multiplayer interceptions that we see in camp are a very big positive, as I would take it. I want to see more of that from safety. I want to see the opportunity for loose bracket interceptions. Any ball that's overthrown, I want to see a safety able to be making a play on the football. I much prefer that stylistically to the go to the midsection, try and disrupt the ball from the receiver way. I mean, it's kind of lowering the top end of what you can get on the play to a pass defense instead of an interception. So I know I've talked about that a number of times in the place. I probably don't need to explain it again. Next play is Chandler Martin, who had good coverage of Jamal Banks about 10 yards up the right sideline, forced an overthrow from rush. Always nice when there's a wide receiver linebacker combination like that, and the linebacker wins out in coverage. It's worth mentioning. Keaton Mitchell had another big yak play, and his whole camp so far has been about big yak plays. Short completion from Devin Leary in this case. Transitions from receiver to runner very quickly after the catch, and did a great job turning that ball upfield and making a big play out of it. What have we seen from Keaton Mitchell here? I don't think you should put a lid on anything Keaton Mitchell might do this year. I think he is potentially an enormous offensive weapon for the Baltimore Ravens. I think he could be a misdirection weapon. I think he could be a weapon as a flanker, a weapon in pony. But I think he is going to force his way onto the football team, even though I think that Monken made a comment later on in the interviews about how Keaton Mitchell is behind Justice Hill. He's going to have to fight for touches and whatnot. I'm not really buying that. I think that Keaton Mitchell is going to be an enormous part of the offense, and we'll see just how much as the season comes along. They also need him for special teams to return kicks. So when I think about that role, first of all, I mean, he has to be around for that, but I also wonder about, is this a year you do keep 4 running backs? Because I don't think Rasheen Ali I think looked pretty good this camp so far, and he might be a second guy to return kicks. The Ravens don't really have the space on offense to keep a second one now, but it's always possible that depth could break down at some position, say wide receiver, and they'd be in then a position to carry another running back. Or maybe they would have one less lineman than they really feel like they need to keep on the roster. They can keep others on the practice squad, use them as elevations initially, and get some incremental special teams value. Kind of hard to say exactly where that extra spot will come from. But one thing I think I can say with some certainty from previous Ravens teams is that they would not typically take that player from the defense, that it would typically be 25, 25, and 3, comprising the 53-man roster. And I know a lot of people have talked a lot of times before, including me, about the possibility of a 26-24 roster this year. This could be the year they go 26 and 24. They just never do it. They never do it. So, you have advocates for both sides. You have the coaches on both sides screaming that they need the extra players. And, you're making me too short. It's not just one short. I'm playing 2 players short than the defense here. And neither side of the ball likes that. And I think they've generally, I'm not saying there's never been a single instance where they haven't had 26 and 24 and 3 on the roster at some point during the season, but their standard is 25, 25, and 3. All right, moving on. We talked about longer beam. Okay, the interception. Let's see. The next one is TJ Tampa. Made 2 nice quick tackles in a row. These are in 7-on-7 drills, so there's something about that that's a little bit less. But the first was on Tylan Wallace. The second one was on DeAndre Hopkins. What I took from these plays is not necessarily anything that directly plays into TJ Tampa, the cornerback, who could be playing to be as high as the 4th corner on this team if Awuzie, really doesn't pan out or the injuries persist or whatever it might be. I think he's behind Alexander. I think he's clearly behind the big 2. But, he could be as high as the 4th corner of this team. He could also be a guy that is just not playing at the speed that they think they need, and he might have to move to safety. Well, if he does move to safety, having a good tackler, a guy who knows when to break downhill and whatnot is a good thing. Now, 7-on-7 drills, they actually delay that. And that's usually something that they point at the linebackers in 7-on-7 drills is, you can't break down too early here. They used to actually have a call for when the linebackers allowed to break downhill. that would come from behind the play from one of the coaches. I don't think they do that anymore, though I'm not listening for it. So I'm not sure. So, but anyway, you should look at 7-on-7 tackles by the defender, 7-on-7 underneath plays with kind of a jaundiced eye as they're reported. But in this case, I thought this was Tampa showing some skills that might be portable to safety if he ends up moving there. The next was Charlie Kolar made a sharp cut to beat Martin for a big yak play. So Martin had a nice play earlier in the practice, but this one he got beat by Kolar for a big yak. Keaton Mitchell had a second play with good burst after a short pass from Cooper Rush. He looks amazing after the catch. He looks amazing. A lot of his ability to get to the second level, first of all, but also he had one play yesterday. We got to the second level. And then immediately basically took a right turn like a video game move on.
You ever have one of those days where everything's off? Well, Mood can help with that. And let me tell you about Mood. It's the online cannabis brand that is changing the way we handle everything, from stress to sleepless nights, with functional gummies that are 100% federally legal cannabis. Mood launched to make cannabis affordable, accessible, and transparent, while at the same time supporting American farmers growing premium hemp on small pesticide-free farms. Their gummies are next level. Seriously, I've tried a few, and each one feels totally different. The Sleepy Time gummies, out like a light, immediately asleep. The Epic Euphoria, it's perfect when you just need a reset to feel good again. What makes them unique? Mood combines THC with herbs and adaptogens, so you get real targeted effects. You're not going to find this in your typical dispensary. And here's the best part. Mood ships discreetly to most states, offers a 100-day satisfaction guarantee, and right now you get 20% off your first order with the promo code RAVEN. Just head to mood.com. Find your perfect gummy and use the code RAVENS at checkout to save 20%.
I mean, he's outrageously slippery and elusive and powerful as well for Keaton Mitchell. So I do expect him to play a big role in the team. Jay Higgins made a quick tackle on a catch by Anthony Miller. Isaiah Likely held on to a catch through contact. He was covered by JAD between the right hash and right numbers. And JAD was either prying at the football or he's kind of holding Likely as the catch was made, but Likely worked his way through that contact to make the catch. Then we had a little bit of a run in between two players. Lamar Jackson was visibly upset with Charlie Kolar for giving up on a ball that was behind him. It was suggested, and Jonas is actually the one who said this, Jonas Schaefer, that he maybe expected him to sit down in zone and wait for the ball. And, it's a tight end, so he should know how to do that. Charlie Kolar, that was his whole game at Iowa State, was being able to sit down in zone and utilize play action and whatnot, but sit down in zone as well. And he didn't do it. It was only 5 yards between the numbers and left hash. It's not a long play, but he didn't sit down and it almost became an interceptable ball. I didn't see if there was a player in the neighborhood who was close to touching the ball. It did fall incomplete, but Jackson was very upset with Kolar on the play. All right. Then Jackson threw a pass for Kolar 20 yards between the numbers and left hash. That was knocked away at the last moment by Bo Braid. So Bo Braid hasn't had a lot of great plays this camp. Good to see him making some. And in particular, anytime he makes a play deeper on the field, that's a bigger deal. We know what Bo Braid can do from last camp and last preseason in terms of making great plays around the line of scrimmage. That really hasn't been the problem. I'm already convinced, based on what we've seen so far, that Bo Braid would be a pretty good dime back. Not concerned about that part at all. I am concerned about him playing the deep half, and hopefully this is a play which indicates some positive portent for that. Next was Keon Martin. There are a couple of Martins on this team, so I got to be careful of who we're talking about. But this is Keon Martin. Had tight coverage of Anthony Miller, 25 yards down the right sideline. Pass was incomplete. And again, Martin's coverage was tight enough on Miller that may have affected the throw as well. I did not see who that went from, who the throw came from. That Jackson hit Likely on a 10-yard pass between the numbers and left hash with Kyle Van Noy in coverage, and it was a zone play where it looked like there were about 3 defenders around, but Van Noy was probably the closest, and Likely probably sitting down in zone the way Lamar liked it, and he was hit for a good solid gain there. I've got nothing to say but good things about Isaiah Likely from what we've seen in camp so far. He's made one-handed grabs with his left hand, with his right hand. The contact almost doesn't affect him. He gets open by large amounts sometimes and by small amounts other times, and it doesn't seem to matter in terms of whether he's making the catch or not. So I think he's had a great camp so far, and you know, I don't know if it'll be natural for him to have a bigger role in 2025. But I think it certainly will come naturally for Isaiah Likely to be a number one tight end wherever he is in 2026 and 2025 if there's any kind of a loss of Mark Andrews for an extended time. I mean, he has looked thoroughly outstanding so far in camp. All right, so we had Lamar Jackson then had an electric long TD run after initially being flushed from the pocket by Malachi Starks. Saw a couple of plays from Lamar today that really looked like vintage Lamar making something out of nothing. And one was this run. Malachi Starks had good pressure in the backfield, but he hadn't gotten there yet. Lamar rolled right away from pressure, and all of a sudden he was gone. And when I say he was gone, no one came within, I don't think, 3 to 4 yards of touching him as he ran towards the end zone. And the crowd probably was at their loudest when that occurred on that play. Then in between, Lamar made another great play we'll get to in a moment, but Nnamdi Madubuike had a pressure that forced Jackson left, and then he threw a 10-yard completion to Wade anyway. And I think what I always say, of course, right-handed quarterback forced to roll left is usually death. It was always death to Flacco with the way he moved his feet. He's just never able to get his body returned to make an effective throw. But in Jackson's case, it's just Lamar being Lamar. He moved left. He made another great throw. And then the third Lamar play, he had another TD run where it appeared like the play was blown dead, or at least everybody stopped trying. And then I was told, I did not actually see this, but I'm writing the note about the play itself. And then somebody says he just threw the ball over the fence, and apparently, the outer fence as you walk down to field 3 in the stands where the fans sits. I know a lot of you have been there for a practice at one point or another. You walk kind of around the outside perimeter of all 3 fields, and it was the fence that's to the right of that walkway that he threw the ball over. So I want to point out, there is a double standard in play. If you're Jordan Lasley, you can't throw the ball out of play like that and expect to not have that have any repercussions. It could be the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of your career. By the way, I don't think it was with Lasley, but I think it was a boneheaded thing that was consistent with some other boneheaded things he did. In Jackson's case, it's probably a silly and an emotive thing to do, but Lamar Jackson has a fair amount of currency in the bank, both real and figurative, with the Baltimore Ravens in terms of his ability not to have any implications from that. Excuse me. Trenton Simpson then made a nice tackle of Mark Andrews after a reception close to the line of scrimmage. Good to see Trenton make a play. Very next play, Justice Hill outraced Simpson after catching a check down pass. Appeared to be a big yak play, and that's nice to see also. So Justice Hill making some plays. A lot of breakaways today. Run plays. It got into level 2 with first contact. I don't know whether I'm worried about the deep run defense, which I could see a reason to be worried, I guess, but we'll have to see how that plays out. Or if I'm more believing that there might be a brother-in-law component to this, in which case I think the defensive coaches would actually be kind of pissed about it. They wouldn't want to see lackadaisical effort that's allowing, even imagined gashes of the defense in the run game. And I think we have seen some of that so far in this camp. Last one, Jackson threw a 15-yard pass to Flowers between Tampa and Starks. It was kind of a whole shot in zone play and a well-thrown pass. I would not say that Lamar's accuracy has been tremendous in camp so far, but today he didn't have any turnovers. I think the one pass that was tipped was, I believe, Cooper Rush. So that went Kane to JAD. So Lamar, this might have been his best day of the 4 so far. Had a couple of nice throws, had a few other throws that were forced incompletes, but didn't make a bunch of mistakes, and had a couple of very electric Lamar-esque plays towards the end of practice. They did a little work in half field drills, and this was actually in between some 11-on-11 sessions, but I put it at the end of my notes. Hamilton had really excellent coverage of Andrews and broke up a pass intended for him. That came from Leary. It was about 20 to 25 yards by the left sideline, and nice to see Hamilton occasionally, getting into a play like that. And then JAD had tight coverage of Zaire Mitchell-Payden, the tight end, 40 yards down the right sideline. That was incomplete from Leary. So Leary does not get very many reps per segment. So if they are running a 10 or 15-minute segment, he might get 2 reps in at the end. And he did finally get to throw, kind of a long ball today. He hasn't had very many opportunities to do that. So nice to see him uncork one, even though it wasn't complete. We had a few different people at the podiums. It was all the coordinators. So Chris Horton was first. I asked him about the rule change to the 35-yard line and how that was going to affect things and how he coached the game. And he said the kicking team is not going to want to allow that. So there should be many more returns. He later talked about how running backs are suited to such duty. This is another question that's brought up directly to referring to what Harbaugh has said before about running backs, and also Keaton Mitchell has referred to that it's like a zone blocking play. What he mentioned was something else, though, not just the find hole, cut, go kind of nature of a running back, but also their ability to bounce off contact should allow for better returns. But he's apparently looking forward to more returns. I think they may also have to devise new ways to kick off to avoid good returns from occurring. You have to kick the ball between the 0 and the 20-yard line, but I think there's going to be a real premium on skipping the ball into the end zone by kickers this year, which will have some associated risk with it. So some kicks may come up short. Of course, the relative risk, if you have a kick that comes up short, is only the difference between the 40 and 35-yard line right now. So while most of the change, I think, impacts the risk of the ball going in the end zone on the fly, because teams will still try to be kicking it closer to the goal line than to the 20. There will be instances where some balls may hit before the 20, and that may result in the 40-yard starting point otherwise. So there'll be I'm sure some kickers who are really trying to skip the football. He talked about the kicking competition. I got into that earlier. The punt return competition. Talked about that. He said it comes down to efficiency. He mentioned a couple of things. The first is not to fair catch long punts when you don't have to. And that is just special teams 101, as far as I'm concerned. He said it was okay to be efficient and run up a long way, catch a punt, and fair catch it. And a lot of times you're preventing a ball from, he didn't say this, but this is what he'd be doing. What such a fair catch would do is preventing the ball from hitting and taking a positive role for the kicking team. That's probably slightly more likely than, a bounce that goes in the kicking team's favor. I think when you do get a bounce that goes downfield, it tends to go further than the bounces that come back in the direction towards the punter. So those fair catches are a good thing when you run up to make them. Fair catches are a bad thing when you do them deep. And he said the biggest thing, of course, is don't put the ball on the ground. So he wanted efficiency in terms of the punt game in those terms. There are 4 guys right now who are in the punt competition. It's exactly punt return competition. It's exactly the guys you'd expect. And I honestly think a lot of it will come down to who the coaches think can make the biggest offensive contribution to the team. So you've got Wallace, whose spot is not in jeopardy on the team at all. And they've got 3 other guys who are on the fringe of the roster. So you have Wester, who I thought was 100% chance to make the roster, but I'm not sure I believe that anymore. Wade, who's had some difficulty catching the ball this year after a great preseason last year. So hopefully he shows out then again. What I'd say about Wade is, and honestly, this is true of all of them, they don't really look settled getting under the football. They don't look like they are tracking the ball exceptionally well. There's too much catching outside the frame instead of catching ready to explode out of your stance into a play. So anyway, that unfortunately is probably a little bit easier, honestly, to do that on kickoffs than it is on punts. But the punt returns we've seen so far, I haven't really noticed that the players able to get into the ball in a timely fashion. Let's see, what else did we talk about? I asked him about whether or not he roots for his special teams players to excel on either offense or defense. Now, the Ravens' way has always been to keep these players who are quote unquote two-way players, meaning special teams and offense or special teams and defense. So you have Tylan Wallace as a good example. Justice Hill is a good example. Albert McClellan, Anthony Levine, extremely useful on their offense or defensive side of the ball, but also very good special teams players as well. Kelly Washington would be another example like that, going back 15 years as a player. But he said he reframed this in a way I thought was particularly clever. Didn't really talk about that, even though I gave him the example of Adisa Isaac perhaps being a player that maybe needs to show out as a pass rusher, so he'll be available to him as a special teams player. He said, a lot of times players graduate from special teams, and I'm to offense or defense, and that a lot of their skills are portable. And so Justice Hill, who returned kicks or covered kicks, then really graduated to be a running back where they couldn't afford to take the risks with him on special teams anymore. So he didn't really play special teams last year. He's then has skills that are portable to take to offense, which is an interesting way to think about it. I actually kind of find it fairly difficult to believe that Horton does not hope that his best special teams assets are guys who not only can play their position well on offense or defense, but also bolster their chance in so doing to be active on a week-to-week basis. So it's probably a fine line he's working there. We'll go Zach Ward next. He said, asked about Jair Alexander, said he brings energy, confidence, hard work, and playmaking to the secondary. He's happy to have him there. Asked about what this defense, with all its depth, needs to do to be great. He says they need to put in the work. And he thought that this team in particular was on another level from the 2014. That's good to hear, because the 2014, floundered for 10 weeks, not really either buying into Orr's system or dealing with other communication issues that were going on, however you want to believe. If the Marcus Williams fans that are still out there, clutching to the belief that he was in the right about everything that happened. But anyway, they, for whatever reason, they didn't play well for 10 weeks, and then they got it together, and they were the best defense in the National Football League with Ardarius and Hamilton on the back end. And he said that they need to put on the work, and he thought this team was on another level. Malachi Starks, he was asked about. He said he's passed every test they've thrown at him. It's an interesting interview, by the way. All these three coordinator interviews, I think, were worth listening to. And a way you typically get more from the coordinators than you get from John Harbaugh, because John's very careful with information, and he'll turn things into coach speak very quickly. Whereas I think all three coordinators have more of an honest streak about them, and they also don't have podium fatigue. So the last 3 days, Harbaugh has been at the podium all 3 days. The first day, he got asked these questions about Trump in the White House. He didn't like it. He tried to reframe it into how cool is it to visit the White House? Well, that's cool. Take your own opinion towards that. But then stuff got written. And it wasn't positive stuff, and of course there's can be someone who'll put a negative slant on any visit to the current White House that you might have. Not to get into it politically at all. Then the second day, I think I might have been part of the problem. I asked him about the points that have been made online about one-score wins. By the way, we're going to have a podcast on that. It'll be coming out Monday, I believe. Brandon Croxton has done some work. I've got some of my own in terms of looking at those one-score wins. I think the whole Sharp shenanigans are complete snake oil. I don't believe them at all. I think that if you look at the successful one-score teams, with the exception of the Chiefs, the successful one-score teams like the Steelers, I don't think their situation is sustainable. In some ways, I think, maybe it's masked a very mediocre team in terms of what they've been able to accomplish. But getting back to this, that was another element of fatigue. And then the rest of that entire interview, Harbaugh was surly about multiple questions. What's the kicking schedule going to look like? He thought that was a stupid question. Are the regulars going to play some in preseason? He got asked. Well, that is a stupid question, but it's way too far in advance. You got to kind of read the room a little bit. And obviously he's in surly mode. But But a lot of this is, it's just, fatigue from answering dumb ass questions day after day. I thought he was better at the podium on day 3, but the coordinators aren't carrying that baggage into this day 4 podium time for them, because it's been probably 8 weeks since any of them have been at the podiums, not since mandatory minicamp. So it's been a number of weeks, and they're fresh and ready to go, and they're generally are going to be pretty direct with you on most questions. So anyway, Zach Orr, we were talking about there, I thought did a good job. Mike Green, he said he works hard and does not say very much, but he thought he worked hard. I kind of wanted to ask him a question about Mike Green as Sam linebacker, but there wasn't time, and a lot of people had questions for Zach Orr today. He said they might try some traveling schemes with Nate Wiggins. That question got asked directly. I forgot who asked it, but a good question. It's information I want to know. And you know what's good about that question? It's real freaking football. And I love questions that are real football instead of feeling questions or leadership questions even. I find those questions kind of tiresome when we get 11 in a row being all 11 questions that get asked of Harbaugh or a coordinator. Ask him a real football question. Anyway, the Nate Wiggins question was a very good one. He said, yeah, I think we might try that. This is a year where we, I think they probably feel like they have the horses to do it. Last year, of course, one of the weaknesses of the Ravens defense was having Brandon Stevens at right corner every single play. And almost every single play until he lost some of his snaps rotationally to Trey White. But when he was over there, the other team knew exactly where to find him. It wasn't a matter of the Ravens defensively are getting the last change, like in hockey or like in the NFL, when the defense gets to make the last change relative to offensive personnel. So that was frustrating, and it was good to hear Zach say that's a possibility. So good to hear. Anyway, Todd Monken was next. The first thing he mentioned was that. And they were talking about, like, why should this offense be better? I forget the exact question. By the way, I always recommend go back and listen to these interviews directly. I'm going to report a lot of the reading between the lines stuff, a lot of how I interpreted what they say. I'm going to paraphrase things they say in a different way. But one thing he said was that his third year with the staff alone was a plus. It's not necessarily third year with all the players. A lot of them are newer than that. But the third year with the staff really meant that in terms of putting together a game plan, for example, that was one example he gave, that it made things easier. And sometimes Monken will kind of redirect off the question to talk about something else. And this was a case where I think he did, but he had more occasions in here later that I'm going to get to. But anyway, since the players and the staff both know each other better, and that's a plus. He's asked about the pre-snap penalties. I'm glad I didn't have to ask him, because I'm the one who had to ask him during OTAs. But someone else did this time. And he said he will not give in to the single cadence, which I mentioned earlier. And actually his response is very similar in OTAs to this. I think it's the right call, by the way. I think Todd is doing what he thinks is best for the football team, but it does mean that the team's probably going to make more mistakes and cost themselves plays in practice with a varied cadence. But it will be more like what will actually happen during the regular season, where they want to vary their cadence. I asked him specifically about the possibility of a fresh legs approach, citing the New Orleans Saints of approximately 2010, and the way they would bring in 5 new receivers, eligible receivers on each play, or 4 on other plays. And it was interesting because, and this was a redirect here that he did. He talked about at first about not knowing who the skill position players were. Okay, understandable. And I by me talking about how great the depth is, I may be making assumptions about who this is. I could also be just saying, hey, look, if the frontline guys are this good, then you add in a layer of depth that whoever you've got on the field is going to be pretty damn good relative to the rest of the league. But in any case, he wanted to make that clear, and that's good. He just wants to say that those jobs are still open. Then he started talking about forcing opponents to defend every blade of grass, which he's done before, but also to force opponents to defend the combination of both concepts and space. Absolutely true, by the way. And then he turned back to me and he said, and I think there was another part to that question. I said, yeah, the fresh legs approach, and you can listen to it if you want. And And then he said, yeah, we might do more substitution or something like that. And he kind of overtalked me re-explaining what I wanted. So it was a difficult thing for me to get exactly. But I will say his response is completely honest, and he's tried to be forthright about it. He just forgot a piece of the question, and he may not have gotten to the entire thing. Anyway, he's not there just to answer my questions. He's there to hand out the information he wants to hand out. He was asked about the team's most glaring inefficiency on offense, and he said, we'll come back to the penalties on that. It's the easy answer in a lot of ways. The offense is not without other mistakes so far, and they don't know a damn thing about the offensive line based on what's happened so far, because the offensive line's not playing real football yet. But they are in a position where they probably don't want to start saying bad things about individual players yet. They don't want to say, well, mesh concepts are not working out because the depth is not proper from the receivers on the other side of the field, blah, 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 blah. He's not going to give us information like that easy. So the easy answer is saying penalties, the way that if you go on an interview and they ask you, what's your biggest weakness? You're supposed to say chocolate. Okay. And that's supposed to let you out of it. And I have heard especially that works very well as a woman. I wouldn't take that kind of bullshit from anybody in terms of their answer. If I was interviewing, I'm telling you that. It's also too well known at this point to be really useful. But anyway, he went with penalties, and I understand. That was the end of the interviews. I thought it was a good, productive interview session. It was certainly honest and straightforward. I thought that all three of them were in a pretty cheerful mood, so that was nice to say, and gave us good information. Anyway, that'll do it for today. I want you to plug the show that will come on Monday one more time on One Score Games. That'll be with Brandon Croxton. Camp notes will be out there. We'll be starting with the first padded practice on Monday, so I hope that's out on Monday night. So you've got a little bit of extra pod listening to do on Monday if you want to be completely caught up. And then we'll be continuing on with camp notes primarily, trying to figure out when I will be able to fit in a Friday morning GM and a one last thing episode. But I am planning on having the normal offense and defense pods that will follow each preseason game. So schedule is very, very tight coming up for the rest of the camp. I will say the other things I do plan to have are preview episodes for each of the preseason games. I hope with Frazier Tafar, although I've not contacted him directly to confirm he's doing this again with me, to talk about what to look for in these three preseason games, because I think there'll be some very key things that the Ravens are looking for in each game to try and accomplish and to try and get certain players snaps and see what they can do. And that'll be the focus of those episodes. Thanks for listening. And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.